Hey everyone, this is Matt here with Nightrun Studio, and I've just started work on the tower defense style city builder mode for my dream game Willard. People often ask me what type of a game I'm making, and it's hard to give a straight answer as I'm really hoping that Willard will prove to be something different.
Do you remember those levels in Warcraft 3 or Starcraft 2 where you had to defend your base against wave after wave of increasingly difficult foes? Well, I'm hoping to channel some of that frantic, just hold out a little longer energy.
But I'm also not making a top-down strategy game. Willard is firmly rooted in a two-dimensional world. If you've played Kingdom, then you can probably imagine a little bit of what combat will feel like.
But unlike Kingdom, the village you'll be building is on the side of a mountain, which means we'll have multiple levels, with many access points from which enemies might attack. But combat will only make up a small portion of the gameplay in Willard. While you'll want to build watchtowers to give you warning when an enemy army is on the march, most of the time your village will feature a different sort of strategy. War is inevitable, but you'll also have to remember that the march of time is just as relentless and winter is coming. You'll need to plant and harvest, but you'll also need to build silos to store grain and canneries to prepare food so your people can eat during the long, cold months when food cannot be grown. Wood will have its stressful moments, like those final days of winter when you just hope no one dies of starvation, or that last wave of enemies that leaves you wondering how you'll rebuild when your best farmers just died in battle. But there will also be long, unbroken moments of peace. Much of the moment-to-moment gameplay in your village will be more like Stardew Valley than any real-time strategy out there. You'll have long periods of leisure to roam your village, reassigning jobs to your people, or joining them by spending a day harvesting lumber or quarrying for stone. Each villager will have his own story, and you can interact with them during these long, peaceful periods. In some cases, your choices will even determine the paths that these NPCs will follow. Take Mason, the fire monk, for instance. You'll have the opportunity to recruit Mason early in the game, and this young, charismatic monk will want to build a temple to the fire god Usik. Along the way, you can choose just how much you want to patronize the spread of this new religion, or if you'll support priests of the old gods who will also want to set up shrines in your village. When you're not busy working in your city, you can explore the wider world. I spent the last year working on this aspect of the game, and if you want to hear more, you can check out the 1 year of development devlog that I released back in June. But for our purposes here, it's important to know that these periods of exploration will lead you to all manner of people who are trying to survive in the post-apocalyptic world that you live in. By aiding these other travelers, many of them will find their way to your village, where you can recruit them and assign various tasks to them.
Now, this is a huge game. I have no illusions of completing it in the near future, but I'm a teacher, which means I've got the whole summer off in which to make some major progress towards my goals. So, at the moment, I'm just 10 days into the city building adventure, but I thought I'd show you how things have been progressing so far.
I knew right from the start that a city builder was definitely going to put my coding ability to the challenge, so I decided to start with some simple AI. Figured if I could get some lumberjacks who could find a tree and cut it down and then retarget a new tree, I'd be off to a good start. Day 2, I added some progress bars so that the lumberjacks are actually able to do harvesting and keep track of how much lumber they've actually harvested, and then at the end they return over to the lumber mill with their load. Things were coming along a little better, so now I decided to add some layers, this time adding a staircase to see if the lumberjacks could actually pathfind in order to take the stairs on their way over to the lumber mill. And you gotta admit, that top of the stairs is just so cute. At this point too, they could drop off their loads and then come back out and get back to work again. Another day, and I created a actual lumber mill graphic. Also added a little bit more pathfinding so that they could actually effectively go back to work, continuing to harvest wherever they left off previously. Next day, I decided just to add some basic UI just so I could practice actually spawning these guys into place and see if once they landed, they would actually be able to have their AI take over, and it worked. They could find their way to the nearest tree, chop that down and then get harvesting, and return eventually everything to the lumber mill. And you'll notice down at the bottom that our lumber mill is now keeping track. Now, if you're wondering what's under the hood of these cute little lumberjacks running around, I essentially created a lumberjack prefab. Now, all of my villagers will eventually have an almost identical prefab, which will have things like a jump and movement script, as well as a level checker so that they know what level of the village they're on. The big change though is that this one has a lumberjack movement script. And all this does is keep track of the current job, whether they're walking to lumber, the mill, chopping, harvesting, etc., and then have them execute a specific method depending on that. This does result in a massive script, and I'm not sure that I like the fact that this isn't particularly modular. I think I'll probably use a state machine down the road, but at the core here you see our enumerations of idle, walking to lumber, mill, etc. And essentially what happens is in our update method, what happens is this script constantly evaluates what is the current job of this harvester, and then it takes them to a method depending on it. So if his job is to walk on lumber, it will just find lumber and then head on down to this walk to lumber method, which will then execute all of the things he needs to do in order to actually walk to the nearest lumber. Now, all of this served as a great proof of concept that I could actually make this thing happen, but this still wasn't the way I wanted it to be. This isn't Age of Empires or Warcraft, where I just drop random nameless NPCs into my map. I wanted each of my villagers to actually be a person that I can get to know and interact with, who has their own skills and abilities. So I spent another day working with UI and doing a lot of coding, and I was able to get things set up so that I can actually select a specific villager, drop them down into the map, and have them go to work. And this is where things really started to get cool. I've created a slot for each of the different villagers in my game. So here's Mason's slot. And in here, there's a script that actually holds an actor scriptable object. These are just scriptable objects that hold important information about a character. For the moment, they hold different portraits for dialogue, as well as different graphics for what they're going to look like when you put them in the game, and different information about their statistics, their hometown, backstory, family, etc. We then store that in one of these slots so that when we summon a lumberjack prefab, we're not just sending a random lumberjack into the map. The lumberjack is actually getting this actor scriptable object inserted into it so that its appearance and stats change depending on which character is entering the map.
Now all of this just represents the first 10 days or so working on my city builder, but already I've got a great foundation to build upon. With my lumberjacks up and running, it'll be that much easier now to add couriers, miners, and scavengers to the village. And for the next 2 weeks, I plan to do just that. My hope is to add in a number of different features to the village, but also to continue to add some visual elements. I have a lot of character stories and backstories written in now. I'm going to need some models so I can actually put them into the game. Otherwise, poor Mason, Isabel, and Catherine are going to get pretty lonely in the village. Thanks so much for taking time to watch. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a comment. Until next time, this is Matt with Nightrun Studio. Cheers.